Tio Magerela, Tio Magerela, iskati besi hamba siya kama brenchi bevaleni. Au iskati besi hamba silale busuku bevaleni. Au bevaleni you, hau bebangeko. Bona bebalele you, o bebalele you, o bebangeko. Au yo 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 bebalele you. Ay yo 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 bebalele. Au yo bebalele you, o bebangeko you. Obe balele, bona be balele you. Obe balele you, obe balele. Ati bo balele. Au be balele. Ati o loloma. Elelema.
Tio mama Tio bushubile. Tio mama Tio sitangene. Ramaphosa petula ngubana bulala baphethe marikana. Ramaphosa petula bulala baphethe marikana. Ramaphosa petula bulala baphethe marikana. Abaphethe marikana. Bulala baphethe marikana. Abaphethe marikana. Bulala baphethe marikana. Abana wesiyakusola. Abaphethe marikana. Abana wesiyakusola. Abaphethe marikana. Ramaphosa petula abaphethe marikana. Ayananase amaphuna bulala uKriza. Ayananase
Gwende, mama, diege, mama, diege. Gwende, mama, diege, mama, diege. Diege, mama, diege, mama, diege, mama, diege. Mama, diege, mama, diege, mama, diege, mama. Gwende, mama, diege, mama. Oh, diege, mama, diege, mama, diege, mama. Le fascine la que la boco, oh, rava, rava, oh yeah, oh yeah, le fascine la que la boco, oh, rava, rava, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh le fascine la que la boco, oh yeah, oh
Tio, mama, tio, minna na wait. Yewe, mata, dia, wemolo, 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 wemolo. Dia, wemolo, 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 wemolo. Katu usengisi na batwadi, afita chuchu, antwaragalizo. We love you, fighter. Molo, molo. We love you, fighter. Molo, molo. Yelele zwiloloko kobe, yelele zwilabanda bamya, yelele zwiloko kobe, yelele zwilabanda bamya, yelele zwiloko kobe, Yelelezwe labantu abamnyama. Yelelezwe jojo. Yelelezwe labantu abamnyama. Yelelezwe jojo. Yelelezwe labantu abamnyama. Anisibona senza njena. Yelelezwe labantu abamnyama. Anisibona senza njena. Yelelezwe labantu abamnyama. Yelelezwe jojo. Yelelezwe labantu abamnyama. Yelelezwe jojo. Yelelezwe labantu abamnyama. Yelelezwe lahlulotiteke. Yelelezwe labantu abamnyama. Yelelezwe lahlulofervote. Yelelezwe labantu abamnyama. Yelelezwe jojo. Yelelezwe labantu abamnyama. Yelelezwe jojo. Yelelezwe labantu abamnyama. Mayanga yanga yanga mayanga yanga yanga. Awelele mayanga yanga senzene tina. Awele oh mayanga yanga yanga mayanga yanga yanga. Awelele mayanga senzene tina. Awele sedang sore mama sore mama. Awelele mayanga sota tum sama. Awe sedang sore mama sore mama. Awelele mayanga sota tum sama. Awele oh mayanga 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 mayanga. Awelele mayanga senzene tena. Awelele mayanga 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 mayanga. Awelele mayanga senzene tena. Oh, Jojo, to mama 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 to Jojo, to mama to mama to mama to mama to ayasawa makwala. Au ayasawa makwala. Aye, autobole polo, double polo, autobole polo, double polo. Oh mama niele, andi funugu aisocha. Oh mama niele, andi funugu aisocha. Yese pami duengane, makarova. Yese pami duengane, makarova. Oh tola tola tola, oh tola tola tola, oh tola tola tola, oh tola tola tola. Kere la tola, kere la tola, kere la tola, kere la tola.
Weka phezulu. Hlala phansi. Weka phezulu. Thula ekhaya. Thula ngomfeni. Thula ekhaya. Thula ngomfeni. Thula ekhaya. Thula ngomfeni. Hlala phansi. Weka phezulu. Thulele phansi. Weka phezulu. Hawu hawu hawu. Esa. Hawu hawu. Esa. Hey, country. Seattle. Thula country. Kilawa. Thula country. Kamasar. Countryla. Kilame. Countryla. Kilame. Hai pelane. Jojo. Hai pelane. Jojo.
Tio makerila sizolilwela le hizela izolilwela kizolilwela izela izolilwela ngizolilwela la ezoma
Woza 2024, woza. Woza 2024, woza. Are we ready for the elections? Are we ready for 2024? Thank you very much. We are going to start. Before we start, we should all find the seats properly and be seated. Fighters should not be walking up and down. We are now going to call upon Commissars Nawotambo to come and sing for us. Nkosi Sigelela. ukukhuphisana nezinyanya nonkulunkulu bethu nazo zonke izithixo eziphilayo nezingaphiliyo ukuba zibe nathi. Khomisa Thabo.
Thank you very much, National Chair. Can we all stand at attention, comrades, take off our hats as we sing the national anthem as composed by Enoch Sontonga without the stem. So males, hats off. Let's stand at attention and sing the national anthem. Ngosi sikeleli Afrika maluphakanyisu phondo lwayo izwa imithandazo yethu Ngosi sikelela thina lusapho lwayo Ngosi sikeleli Afrika maluphakanyisu phondo lwayo izwa imithandazo yethu Ngosi sikelela thina lusapho lwayo sithi woza moya woza moya woza moya
Siyabulela Khomisa Thabo ngomthandazo omhle nochukumisa. Ndiyaqonda wonke umuntu uneprogram. We must now turn into our program of the day. This is the plenum which we always have in each and every year, right at the beginning, to pave the way forward on what must be done for the year. And you can look back at what we have resolved on in the previous plenums. What did we achieve? What did we not achieve? But most importantly, the plenum is constituted of many people. Mandini bulise molweni. Sibulele ubukho buka president. Sibulele officials. Sibulele commissars. The PCTs, the RCTs, public representatives, and the fighters that have joined us today, you are welcome. This is your plenum. And this plenum, all of us were expected to be disciplined. We must remember the Section 6 of the Constitution, all the principles of the EFF. What are the duties of a fighter? What are your obligations as a fighter? What are the obligations of you as a member? If you know Section 6, 7, 8 of the Constitution, you will know the importance of being here and how to enhance your duties out there as a fighter. Now we're going to call upon the DSG to give us the credentials of the meeting. Deputy Secretary General, Poppy my lord.
Amandla, Matla, Matimba, Hai Khule, EFF, Ai Khule, Pata, EFF, Pata. Thank you very much, National Chair. Greetings, President and Commander-in-Chief, the officials, leadership of the provinces, and our guests. This is the credential report of the fourth plenum of the second National People's Assembly of the Economic Freedom Fighters. In total, delegate expected are 601, present are 504, 97 are not present. Central Command team expected are 64, present are 63, and one apology from Commissar Botswe Matidiso due to bereavement. Provincial command teams. In Eastern Cape expected 25, present 21, and 4 are not present. In Free State expected 23, present 18, and 5 are not present. In Gauteng expected 23, present 20, and 3 are not present. In KwaZulu-Natal, expected 23, present 22, and 1 not present. In Limpopo, expected 23, present 20, and 3 are not present. In Mpumalanga, expected 23, present 19, and 4 are not present. In Northwest, expected 23, present 18, and 5 are not present. In Northern Cape, expected 23, present 22, and 1 not present. In Western Cape, expected 23, present 19, and 4 are not present. Regional command teams top 5 members. In Eastern Cape, expected 40, present 31, and 9 are not present. In Free State, expected 24, present 17, and 7 are not present. In Gauteng, expected 25, present 21, and 4 are not present. In KwaZulu-Natal, expected 54, present 43, and 11 are not present. In Limpopo, expected 24, present 23, and 1 not present. In Mpumalanga, expected 20, present 15, and 5 are not present. In Northwest, expected 20, present 17, and 3 are not present. In Northern Cape, expected 24, present 20, and 4 are not present. In Western Cape, expected 27, present 24, and 3 are not present. Student command expected are 36, present 28, and 8 apologies. Members of Parliament expected are 12, present 10, and 2 are not present. Members of Provincial Legislature expected are 22, 13 present, and 9 are not present. And in our midst, we've got the following guests: Dr. Lwazi Luchaba, Dr. James Matawane, Fighter Mafia Fane, Fighter Janki Sibulao. Thank you very much, National Chair.
Ngosi DSG, those were the credentials of the plenum. Now we are going to get the provincial secretaries to quickly give us the reasons for the absenteeism of the fighters. It's okay, it's already registered with the DSG. Let me now greet and give a special welcome to our guests, which I believe they are going to also be contributing at a later stage. Molweni. President of the Student Command, you must be ready. Our next item is the opening address. And that address we are going to be given by the President and the Commander-in-Chief. The President of Student Command, take the mic, please. We can't find it.
Amandla. Amandla. Viva EFF, viva. Viva EFF, viva. Tata EFF, tata. Tata EFF, tata. Auwe musho mashodi, auwe. Auwe musho ANC, auwe. Down with DA, down. Down with Ellen Zille, down. Down with DA, down. Forward to expropriation of land without compensation, forward. Forward to expropriation of land without compensation, forward. Amandla. Amandla. Thank you very much, Deputy President, the National Chairperson, the Secretary General, the Deputy Secretary General, and the TG. Let me first start by apologizing to the delegates and the people of South Africa because there was a communication which was issued that we are going to start at 6 o'clock and we are starting a bit late. And that communication, when it was issued, no one had asked for it. On your own, knowing your own plans, unprovoked. You say to people they must be gathered because you'll be broadcasting this live on television and YouTubes and all social media. And you disappoint them by not doing so, and worse, you come here and not apologize. It's unacceptable that. We should never think we've got advantage of our people. We should never think we are above our people. When we on our own communicate that at 6 o'clock we'll start, we must start at 6 o'clock. And if there are reasons beyond our capacity, another communique must be issued that there are delays, will start very soon. It's only polite and leadership to do so. Therefore, I sincerely apologize for that. also to members of the media who are here, who had their own plans that in an hour's time or so, they will be going and rushing to do other things. It is a new year, and we should do things differently. Commissars, members of provincial command teams, regional command teams, public representatives, the leadership of our movement nationally and all over, we take this opportunity to welcome you to the 4th annual plenum of the 2nd National People's Assembly of the Economic Freedom Fighters. We are pleased that you have all emerged from the festive period intact and ready to continue with the pursuit of the attainment of economic freedom in our lifetime. Your lives belong to the revolution. It is encouraging that you treated yourself responsibly over the festive season and returned to continue with the duty of serving the poorest of the poor. Many amongst us spent and took time during this period to reach out to our communities and lend a helping hand to those in need through donations, recreational, developmental programs, or even if it was inviting a needy family into your home for a meal. We commend and encourage such acts as they are what defines leadership of our people and leave a lasting mark in the hearts and minds of those who are less fortunate. Comrades, the plenum marks an opportunity for us as a collective leadership from all over the country and within the legislative sphere to reflect on the challenges confronting us internally and externally, while setting the agenda for the organization for the next year. One of the key tasks we have in a year before the decisive 2024 national and provincial government election is to assess our strength, identify our weaknesses, and develop a coherent and comprehensive program of action which will locate us in each and every corner of our country. Importantly, our strategies and tactics must always be mindful of the fact that not only are we in the campaign phase of an election year, we are equally celebrating a monumental achievement of sustaining the leftist and socialist organization in a hostile and capitalist condition for 10 years. Commissars and fighters, we are gathered here as the EFF and marks a great and significant milestone not only for itself, but for the liberation of all of our people and the return of the land. A decade ago, we undertook the task of building a movement that will be a place for refugees, for the poor, a shoulder to lean on for the abused, a source of strength for the exploited, a place where those who have historically been forgotten can find their identity and ultimately liberate themselves. This economic emancipation movement, the Economic Freedom Fighters, was formed 10 years ago, and no one believed that we would make it this far. When we canvassed the idea of political alternative and spoke to the grassroots activists across the length and breadth of the country on what is to be done, many already predicting our inevitable failure. Inspired by the 26 July movement, the Cuban Revolution led by Commandant Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, we formed the basis for a revolutionary movement whose ultimate aim is to achieve the state power in order to implement a socialist program that will usher in economic liberation of our people. We consulted with activists from various backgrounds and those who hailed from the former liberation movement, those who had a background in grassroots organization in communities, the youth, the elderly, and even the activists whose first political home will be the EFF. It was through the participation of those who have been rejected and forgotten. It was through the inputs of shack dwellers, the mine workers, domestic workers, gardeners, security guards, students, professionals, and activists that a decision was taken to form a political alternative, and a decision was taken that we should continue to fight. Our glorious movement was born through consensus of the poor and consensus of those who had come to realize that political freedom achieved in 1994 was meaningless without economic freedom. Our movement was formed on the ideological basis and correct understanding that our political system had fallen victim to the hands of the corrupt few who had no interest of achieving the ultimate aim of a generations of anti-colonial struggles, namely the return of the land and mineral wealth of African people. We are a movement that was formed on the objective analysis of the conditions that confront our people, which was and remains increasingly the levels of poverty, continued inhumane living conditions, which perpetuate apartheid, racist spatial planning, landlessness, joblessness, racial inequality, and massive exclusion of Africans from the economy and the means of production. Our existence remains a response to the lack of respect to the African child faces here in South Africa, in the continent and the diaspora. We are a response to the criminalization of the black skin and the permanent war which has been waged on the black people by those who have always been our historical enemies. Perhaps most painfully, our movement was formed as a necessary resistance after the painful realization that the former liberation movement had indeed become a weapon in the hands of white monopoly capital and a weapon whose target was black and poor people. The birth of the EFF came immediately when the first drop of blood of Mgcineni Mambush Noki fell at the Kopi and turned the soil at Marikana into a bloodbath. As those bullets hit the flesh of 34 mine workers, our ancestors who had died bitterly in the hands of colonialists demanded that the EFF be formed to be the shield of our people against those who had murdered them and were now murdering their own children. As the defiant miners at Marikana were executed across the mountain at Marikana, with weapons being planted by their side to create an impression that they were a threat, a giant was being woken up. It is this giant that is reaching a decade of existence today. We were born out of the blood of Marikana, not only to avenge our people, but to ensure that such devastating tragedy never happens again. We were formed as an answer to the cries of widows of Marikana who buried their husbands, sons and brothers, not knowing why they were executed without mercy. The EFF and the Marikana massacre can never be separated because it was those mine workers, those widows, and those fatherless children who, with tears in their eyes, demanded the birth of this movement. It was the blood that was soaked into the soil of Marikana that demanded the formation of this movement. As we sit here today, we mark 10 years of answering to those cries. We lead in various structures, in various municipalities, legislatures, and parliament with a mandate from Marikana. We call each other commissars not for self-gratification, but because we bear the responsibility of healing a broken society. Fellow fighters, the responsibility upon our shoulders is as old as the struggle against colonial conquest itself. I say this not to intimidate you, but to help you appreciate the responsibility you have so that you never take it for granted. You must never take it for granted that our people find hope in the red beret and the red t-shirt of the EFF. You must never underestimate that our people are intelligent enough to know that we are the true custodian of their history and we are the only capable enough to lead them into the future. The moment you take for granted the historical task that has been given to us is when we'll betray the past and fail the future. The moment you regard your responsibility as a burden and you conduct your work not out of service to the revolution, but out of compliance, is when you must know that you have taken the calling of leading the EFF for granted. You must know where we come from. You must know why the EFF exists. Otherwise, you will make your revolutionary duty as a job obligation, and as a result, nothing you do will be inspired by the ideals of liberation and love for the people. One of the most revolutionary responsibilities we have as leaders of the EFF is to have an undying love for our people. This is because you will never make a sacrifice for a cause you do not love and for a people you do not love. You will never sacrifice time away from your family if you resent the work that comes with liberating African people. And that work comes with being amongst Africans. If you do not love our people, you will resent deployment because deployment takes you away from those you find comfort with and takes you to the trenches where our people are suffering. You must love our people if you have any intention of liberating them. There is no liberation without love. And this task is so difficult because it requires you to love a hated people. Black people are hated and have been programmed to hate themselves. To love a black person is such a revolutionary exercise because it requires of you to love that which is socially, economically, politically dead and defeated. Black people are hated all over the world, discriminated against all over the world, and are described as the moral problem in society. We are a people so difficult to love because it means loving a defeated being. Our task as revolutionaries is therefore to show love to black people and show them that they remain a possibility of victory and life, even though the world designed to defeat and dehumanize them. One of the first responsibility we continue to bear, therefore, is to be present and lead the struggle of our people. The presence requires a deliberate effort to conscientize black people and make them realize their own humanity. We have a responsibility to show black people that their humanity cannot coexist with poverty, helplessness, and humiliation, and to show them that their conditions are not normal. It is through consciousness that will liberate them and show them the path to economic freedom. This, however, cannot be achieved without the vanguard movement such as the EFF. It is critical that we build a 10 years that we have achieved in existence. The foundation has been laid. Our duty is not to become complacent. Going into the next 10 years of struggle for economic freedom of African people, we must revisit our founding ideas, our purpose and our objectives, and prepare ourselves to govern. We must revisit the core principles so that we do not forget who we are and why we exist. This is important, comrade, because we are set to become a new generation of politics, not only in South Africa, but in the continent. We are set with the task of breaking the curse of post-colonial liberation movement, who become consumed with self-interest and corruption and have no ability to lead our people into promised land of independence and prosperity. The EFF is an opportunity for all African people to truly achieve liberation. We are an opportunity to build a thriving African continent that participates in the world on equal footing and not as a stepchild of the imperialists. All of you, therefore, as objectively the best which the EFF has to offer in terms of leadership and capacity, must know that you are in service of the millions of Africans who came before us and fought for our dignity and freedom. You are servants of the slain in Marikana. You are the descendants of those who were massacred in the wars of dispossession, and you carry the inheritance of fighting for the return of the land. We must, fellow fighters and commissars, begin at the beginning and remember who we are, so that the last 10 years become a springboard to liberation and not yet another historical mistake in the quest for liberation in Africa. Commissars, one of our defining ideological features is our commitment in the ideological ideals of Frantz Fanon. There are two aspects that we must re-emphasize of Fanon, which will be critical to our election campaign and our communication to our people. The two chapters of particular significance are both in his book, The Ratchet of the Earth, and they are called The Pitfalls of National Consciousness and On Violence. The significance is in that one provides a guide on why liberation movement failed post the liberation moment, and the other provides a diagnosis on the necessity of violence. and the violence of existing in a colonial and neo-colonial society. If we want to learn from the mistake of those who came before us, Fanon is instructive because he tells us what not to do and what to become. The problem internally that we confront as Africans is the existence of liberation movements who sustain themselves on blackmail and through the use of law enforcement agencies to suppress the demands of the people for the promise of liberation. Fanon teaches us that and illustrates that the liberation movement has no potential to lead us into the future, is preoccupied with reminding our people of the past in each and every election cycle and periodically through meaningless celebration of so-called independence. It is a class of triumphalist politicians who begin to resent the masses and categorize them as people who do not appreciate the leadership of the liberation movement. Former liberation movement, therefore, begins to build a wall between itself and the masses, while impatiently accumulating petty wealth in alliance with the West. Fanon's lessons are important because he shows us that the post-liberation national leadership reconstitutes itself as a mediator of the affairs of capital, turning the nation into a brothel of imperialists. Fanon shows us that the decay in the relationship between the people and the liberation movements creates a political class that no longer relates to the people and therefore has no appreciation of the continued poverty of the people in the face of their inability to reconstruct society away from the grip of colonialism. Because of this, the former colonizers increases their grip over resources of the former colonial nation through concessions, loans, and numerous mechanisms that entrenches our underdevelopment and dependency on the West. The national bourgeoisie, which is too underdeveloped to lead strategic sectors of the economy, turns back to the colonialists and subscribes to the Europeans. Their inability lead to the collapse of not only the nation, but the liberation movement itself. This is what the EFF must always be cautious of, as our presence increases in governance and places of political influence. We must be careful not to resent our people because they do not vote for us, even though we fight bitterly for their dignity. We must be careful not to be tempted by the crumbs the imperialist leaves for the political class and begin to forget the genuine purpose of our struggle for liberation. We must be careful not to accumulate so much personal wealth that the hunger of our people for land, jobs, education, and decent life become slogans that we cheer whenever we celebrate our own existence. Our reflection of the decades of selfless struggle for economic freedom in our lifetime must not become a parade to immobilize our people and self-praise, but it must be an occasion upon which we renew our passion and commitment to liberating our people. We must be careful not to follow the path of the former liberation movements. Fanon writes painfully that, I open quote, after a few years, the breakup of the party becomes obvious, and any observer, even the most superficial, can notice that the party today, the skeleton of its former self, only serves to immobilize the people. The party which during the battle had drawn itself, the whole nation, is now falling apart. The party is becoming a means of private advancements, close quote. We must keep the prophecy of Fanon close to our hearts so that this economic emancipation movement fulfill its objective. Comrades, these are internal contradictions that we ought to avoid in order to ensure that we do not face the same fate of betraying the mandate of liberation. It is self-reflective diagnosis that we must all internalize as we enter a decade of struggle, so that we do not use our history of struggle and the external pressure posed by imperialism as a means to avoid accounting to the revolutionary expectations of our people and entrenching our own self-interest and corruption. The second of Fanon's insight that we as a collective ought to keep close to our hearts is the phrase that decolonization is always a violent phenomenon. This is important for militant organizations such as ourselves because we are tasked with reawakening the consciousness of a society that is convinced of the possibility of reconciliation without justice. The EFF existence in a country that is indoctrinated to think that the contradictions between the African black majority and the white capitalist ruling class can be resolved in a peaceful manner, and that violence in any of its manifestation must be avoided and condemned. This is simply not true. We must be able to explain that to our people. When the South African Human Rights Commission decided to take us to court for saying that ultimately our revolution requires of us to kill, we must be able to properly contextualize what we mean. When the Human Rights Commission and the racist lobby group AfriForum take us to court for saying that we are in a war with white supremacy, we must be able to explain to our people what black consciousness is and why it cannot coexist with the idea that white people are inherently superior. Therefore, one must die. Fanon is important in this because he gives us the tools to explain to our people that conditions within which they live in are violent. It is violence to segregate African people to underdevelopment townships and villages without services. It is violence for white minority to have complete control over the means of production in Africa. It is violence that the majority of the land is in the hands of white minority. Colonialism is institutionalized and structural violence, and to reverse it, it requires violence. It is a form of systematic violence towards white supremacy to change legislation to allow for land expropriation without compensation. But this violence is rooted in justice. That is the message that we are sending, that there cannot be unity and reconciliation in South Africa without justice, and that justice will be violent to those who are comfortable at the expense of African people. Ultimately, there will be a need to take up arms, as this is the eventuality of all struggles against injustice that is met with resistance. This logical conclusion exists because the white capitalist class feels entitled to wealth and resources that they accumulated through crime, and will violently defend their right to exploit and oppress African people. In the face of this arrogance, violence is inevitable. This is what we must be able to explain to our people, coherently and logically. Decolonization questions the colonial situation, casts it into doubt, and makes it the native and active role player in changing the order of the world. It is a substitution and radical reorganization of society wherein the last shall be first and the first shall be last. The process, therefore, Fanon tells us, demands of us to be ready for violence at any stage, because it is not possible to change society born out of and sustained by violence without violence itself. Colonialism is born from blood, suffering, slavery, and destruction of Africans and African identity. Without violently subjecting of the African, the colonial system in itself ceased to exist. Our people being denied education is violence. Our people living in shacks is violence. Our people working in the mines yet earning little money while enriching the global capitalist is violence. The erasure of our history is violence. The fact that labor, such as domestic work, garden work, and security service are jobs reserved for Africans in service of white people is violence. The fact that a white child first encounter with an African is that an African is a servant is violence. The entire existence of African is an image through the eyes of the colonizer, and to radically change and imagine ourselves through our own eyes and tradition will be a violent process. The two zones of reality Fanon speaks of, where the town of the European is filled with tarred roads, lights, as opposed to the land of the native, which is filled with poverty and a lack of space as people live on top of one another, perfectly describes the violent situation in South Africa, which must be changed. These are the realities we must be able to explain to our people. We must be able to show them how abnormal their situation is, so that the prospects of violence does not offend them. Our people must never be offended by violence, because we must show them that their very existence is violent. Commissars and fighters, through all of this, we must equally consider the external challenges that result in the collapse of the revolutionary project for African independence. These external challenges are posed by neo-colonial imperialism. Many liberal thinkers like to credit the failure and the collapse of African states to the leadership style of African leaders and blame socialist and anti-imperialist policies. Imperialists and their so-called governance experts blame the failure of African economies on the resistance of independent states to the anarchy of the markets, constantly calling for increased role of the markets and privatization as a solution to economic problems. By the anarchy of the market, we mean that the capitalist class and its proponents in various spheres of society want democratically elected states to allow policy direction and economies to be run and dictated by invisible hand known as the independent markets. This independent market downgrades and rates economies and assess whether a nation is investor-free based on what is regarded as correct political, social, and economic policy. The anarchy of the markets refers to allowing the private sector to self-regulate while equally regulating the society that costs of goods and services, no matter how essential they may be, and without consideration of the basic needs of the people. It results in the manipulation of prices and collusion by private sector to maximize profit, regardless of the impact this may have on ordinary people. It is a breeding ground for corruption. Resistance to this capitalist, disorganized and undemocratic madness through decisive state intervention and planned economy is termed a form of dictatorship. The resistance to the markets and capitalist-based system that pretend to be ideologically neutral is one of the many reasons African states are said to fail. All these reasons for the failure of socialist or African state is promoted by imperialist nation in order to avoid being located as the problem confronting Africa and the third world. It is done to mask the efforts of imperialism to instill hegemony of capitalism policy and its assumption that only legitimate form of authority is that which the West has developed, while presenting authority itself as a problem when it is not Western orientation. As Marxists, you must appreciate that our problems are because of global capitalism and its advanced manifestation, which is known as imperialism. But first we must know what is Marx and what is authority, and why global capitalism mobilizes itself against alternative ways of organizing the economy. Fighters, commissars, and comrades, the West has a tendency of creating an impression that one of the problems confronting the continent is that of authority. The notion that the absence of authority is what will result in freedom and prosperity, and that all attempts running communist and socialist states have failed primarily due to authoritarian character of the leadership of these revolutions or states. President Mugabe, President Gaddafi, President Sankara, President Castro, President Xi Jinping, President Putin are all accused of being authoritarian, as if the West is controlled by a friendliness of students of democracy. But put differently, as if democracy itself lacks authority. Authority refers to the imposition of the will of one sector of society unto other. And in the instance of democracy, authority refers to the will of the majority prevailing over the few. In any instance, authority itself is ever present in order for any system to function. There must be a command from superior to subordinate. The demonized authority within the revolution, within a context where we wage a war against capitalism, is either ignorant or deliberate sowing of the seeds of confusion. What the liberal thinkers who try and discredit authority fail to understand in their hypocritical views on authority is that authority is consistent under any economic and political system, and that even capitalism itself thrives on authority. Capitalism survives on the fact that the state which currently operates to preserve capitalist interests operate with an authority of having monopoly on violence. Authority refers to the system, hierarchy, and the following of a system as a result of a power which is given legitimately by the people. As socialists who are in war with the most perverted global economic system known to mankind, the absence of authority in our revolution is a guarantee of failure. The West wants us to lack authority so that we can be chaotic and disorganized, and we must never allow our enemy to define us. We must always subject ourselves to the authority of the leadership, a leadership which draws its legitimacy from the masses and not subscribe to the reactionary or liberal definition of democracy, which will strip the revolution of its essence. As a Marxist, we seek the authority of the proletariat to surpass that of the bourgeoisie. Marxism is a school of thought wherein the working class destroys the authority of capitalism, which thrives on the ideals of private property, an economy designed for profiting an elite at the exclusion of the poor and the monopoly of wealth in the hands of the few. In simple terms, as Marxists, we believe in the authority of the people over the means of production and not authority of the bourgeoisie over the people and the means of production. We believe that the people must dictate the form and character and direction of the economy, not the elite few, controlling our political, social, and economic reality under the lie of neutral market forces. So no one, commissars and fighters, has any ideological basis to call the EFF authoritarian, because the very system of capitalism which we live under thrives on authority, and that authority is of the few. The aggression, therefore, that confronts us as socialists is not based on the ideological belief that we operate and strive for conditions where freedom are stripped from people. Rather, we are attacked and labeled because capitalism wants to have global hegemony, and that means being aggressive to any emerging economic and political alternative. That is the motivating factor behind the aggression of global capitalism that seeks to exist on its own, and as a result, it ironically seeks to exclusively have authority. Cuba has been subjected to over 60 years of sanctions and embargoes because they have shown the possibility of the success of socialism and the authority of the working class. China is being characterized as an emerging threat because they pose a threat to global imperialism through massive production and industrialization through the ideals of socialism with Chinese characteristics. Russia, although they may not be aligned to the ideals of social reconstruction, which is informed by Marxism, poses a political threat to the hegemony of the West, and that is why NATO has collaborated itself to undermine its security and criticize its authority. Authority is not the real concern of capitalism. The concern of capitalism is authority that is not held and controlled by capitalists themselves. We must appreciate this to avoid falling into the trap of listening to dishonest critics. The EFF is criticized as an authoritarian even though we hold our democratic elections from national, provincial, regional, and branch level. Yet our counterparts who are funded by the establishment, such as Democratic Alliance, Action SA, and other parties, are never presented as authoritarians, even though in many instances they never hold elections. If anything, all this organization, Action XA in particular, appoints leaders and does not subject its own organization to democratic processes, yet they are not called authoritarian. This shows you that the problem is not authority, but whether capitalists control and inform that authority or not. The EFF, for a decade, avoided our authority being determined from outside of the founding principles, which makes us a people's movement. As a result, we have become the primary enemy of capital. We, comrades, must therefore never fear any critique that seeks to paint us badly, because we run our organization with authority, and we must know that our authority is that of the working class and is not influenced by capitalism. Therefore, fighters, because of our independence, we must expect an aggressive onslaught from captains of the industry and their puppets in the media, especially since we are celebrating decade of existence. There will be an attempt to paint our achievements of the past few years as non-existent, as nothing but disruptive and dangerous, because the agenda is to undermine that which capital does not control. Our duty is to expose this to our people and be consistent with the message that the EFF remain the only incorruptible and uncaptured organization that will deliver socialism in our lifetime. Commissars and fighters, the EFF has been vindicated on numerous occasions regarding the political, social, and economic direction of South Africa since our formation in 2013. We correctly predicted the decline of the ruling party and the decline of the conditions confronting our people in terms of their poverty, unemployment, the arrogance of racism, the lack of progress in industrialization. Critically, the ruling party has been unable to leverage state-owned enterprises as a method to build South Africa's economy. And in the case of Eskom, they are currently on a path to completely destroy this country through electricity blackouts. Thousands of small businesses are collapsing on a daily basis as a result of rolling blackouts, as small business owners struggle to balance the cost of diesel for backup generators and cost of rendering their services and accumulating revenue to pay municipal rates and staff. It has become a self-destructive to own a business in this country in the current conditions. And electricity has become a luxury of those who can afford diesel, which in itself is expensive. Comrades, there is no verifiable plan to fix current crisis at Eskom. And to make matters worse, there is no policy certainty as to what source of energy ought to be used to ensure stable electricity supply in South Africa. Our government is broken up and fractured between a neo-colonial renewal energy lobby and the realistic perspective of the need to continue to use our natural resources to generate energy. This uncertainty and split is created by capital itself. The crisis at Eskom is created by capital itself because it's a capital that is disparate to collapse Eskom in order to ensure private sector control through independent power producers and renewable companies which are owned and controlled by the West. There is pressure to make South Africa an energy experiment for the complete abandoning of coal as an energy source in favor of exclusive reliance on renewable energy. Ramaphosa has received $8.5 billion to surrender our energy capacity to this irrational experiment that will collapse our economy and result in the loss of thousands of jobs, particularly in Mpumalanga. This happens in the context of Europe nations increasing their use of coal to generate energy, revealing that it is nothing but environmental imperialism by nations who want to maximize the extraction of our coal by getting us to stop using it completely. Germany is expanding its coal mines to the extent of removing settlements so that they can easily access coal to generate electricity. In China, coal power plants are being expanded and built because the role of coal is still central to the production and industrial process. In the United States of America, there is a heavy pressure on Biden administration to expand its coal reserves and operation by coal miners themselves. Yet, as we sit here, the U.S. Secretary of Treasury is here in South Africa to entrench the agenda of making South Africa to abandon coal. Comrades, the EFF must lead workers and coal mining communities in rejecting the agenda to collapse our coal mining sector and the non-existence of so-called just transition. There is no plan to transition to renewable energy source in a way that will secure jobs and ensure energy security in South Africa. And to make matters worse, there is no consultation that has been done with South Africans on the planned closure of coal power stations. We must lead the revolt in these communities, but more importantly, the EFF must begin to develop a coherent and practical energy policy that will protect the environment and jobs while not having the dangerous external influence of the USA. As an organization, we must move beyond providing the necessary political solution to the operational crisis confronting ESCOM and provide technical insight on what needs to be done to stabilize the energy crisis in the country. This means that the EFF must develop a case studies and expert-informed analysis on the best route to resolve the energy crisis through nuclear energy, gas, fossil fuel, and renewable forms of generating energy such as wind and solar energy. We must give deeper insight on how there are safe ways of using coal that have a lesser impact on the environment. Our rejection of the approach by this government to transition to renewable energy must never be mistaken as a disregard for the environment. The environment must be protected and a balance must be reached on how this can be done while protecting the livelihoods and economic possibilities of our country and the continent through the use of our minerals. Commissars and fighters, the crisis of gender-based violence continues to be a nightmare in this country that has no end. The threat which is due to our society that no longer has any morals and ethics guiding it has resulted in women being paralyzed with fear and children living in a world where they are prey to predators in schools, in their communities, and even their homes. Most recently, we have seen reports and footage of how a young 12-year-old boy was raped by his mother, a traumatic experience that no child should ever go through. This has shown us that as much as the girl child is a victim to abuse, to a point where there are over thousands teenage pregnancies between the year 2021 and 2022, the boy child is not immune to abuse. It is painful reality in our society where even our children are no longer safe and their childhood is stolen from them by cruel and criminal individuals. Our society is deteriorating before our eyes. There is moral vacuum in our society as the church is no longer respected. The institution of family has lost its meaning, and those who lead our society are culprits themselves, as seen with the ANC MP who is alleged to have killed his wife recently. The EFF must develop a community outreach programs and temporary measures of providing shelters and safety for victims of abuse. The EFF needs to become a moral compass in society and be recognized as an authority in communities that will uproot crime and abuse. This means we need our public representatives to be fearless activists who do not turn a blind eye and deaf ear to the cries of women and children who are abused within our communities. We must have teams that intervene on a daily basis on matters of abuse and work hand in hand with law enforcement agencies. the EFF must take back to the people, and our leaders must occupy organs of people's power so that we can recognize we can be recognized as a morally superior alternative that is in touch with our people. You must establish community forums that do not practice vigilantism but operate within the confines of the law and bring perpetrators of violent crime to justice. Our branches must be visible in fighting drug abuse, extortion rings, and all organized crime, and must not simply convene to elect delegates for assemblies and positions in councils. Our people's movement is found fighting crime, fighting abuse, participating in alleviating the social ills in our communities. There is no legislation or heavy-handedness, policing, or deployment of the army that will stop crime and abuse. It requires social intervention, and the EFF is the only organization that is capable of achieving that. I think what I will do, I've got there. It always pains me, especially in the EFF, when I find women hard at work to defend men abusers, women who get to be put in positions of power and authority, who get an opportunity to exercise that power to defend women and make women feel safe in the EFF. It will be the same women who use such power to undermine other women and make them feel unwelcomed in the organization. After abusing the power they are given by the organization to defend fellow women, immediately after that, they will take a platform and say women are abused. We must fight for women's rights. We are feminists in public, yet in private, we are the one who are perpetuating and encouraging violence against women. Shame on you. Why would you be a woman who stand bold and defend a man who threatened violence against another man for factional purpose, for you to defend your position, for you to be loved by men over women? Comrades, my blood boils every time I have to convince a woman in the EFF about how wrong this man is. We need to find it in our souls. That is it correct, or are you also part of those who are abusing women? When you take a platform as a woman, a platform of authority which you can use to defend women and build their confidence in the organization, you use that against them. Are you not an abuser yourself? Are you not part of this fundamental problem we are confronted with? Comrades, every male comrade must be very scared to come closer to any woman in a manner that is not permissible. That man, all of us, if we are in doubt, we must ask the question, may I? So that there is no misunderstanding of your actions. Men must always be aware whether their decisions on the bodies of women are correct or not. Women must never doubt themselves. It is men who have created this problem, and therefore they must doubt their actions if it is in keeping with what the EFF stands for, and therefore seek to correct themselves. It is us men who must engage in a process to unlearn the bad habits that we were taught growing up and learn the new habits of coexisting with women and see women as equal human beings. I was so disappointed when all provinces elected men as chairpersons of provinces all over South Africa before the conference of Limpopo. And in Limpopo gave me a very nice Christmas present by electing a woman. She was never elected because it's a woman. Look at her. She doesn't doubt herself. She knows no one did a favor for her. She leads from the front. And not only leading from the front, she comes with victory in her hands. And that's what she did in Ward 10 in Polokwane, winning that ward back into the hands of the EFF. And all those doubting Thomases who thought a woman is going to lose a ward of the EFF, today they are left with eggs on their faces, proving once more that indeed women can do better than men. She did not only come with victory, she increased our numbers in a highly contested ward, in Ward 10, and took us from 17% to doubling our number in Ward 17 in Bloberg. We might have lost the ward, but we showed the ANC flames in a rural ward under a female leadership. So those of us who have addresses in Limpopo, unlike others who are deputizing us, who claim to have addresses in Limpopo and don't have addresses, we are very, very, very proud to be Limpopo citizens under the chairpersonship of our female chairman. Comrades, commissars and fighters, there remains a need to achieve free education in South Africa. If there is any prospects of building a country that will develop and sustain itself for future generations. The recent matric results reveal the resilience of the youth in difficult circumstances. However, that fact that over 500,000 children who enrolled grade 1 in 2011 did not write their matric in 2022 is a matter of concern. This yearly occurrence revealed that thousands and thousands of youth in South Africa are on the outskirts of education, making them vulnerable to drugs, alcohol abuse, and crime. We must embark on the youth revival program to encourage young people to return to education at all levels so that they can better themselves and our communities. The EFF Student Command is expected to ensure that no prospective student is turned away from the doors of learning on the basis that they cannot afford education. Our long call for SASSA beneficiaries to not be expected to perform their poverty in order to get NSFAS funding has been accepted by government, and it is your task to ensure that it is implemented to the latter. We expect the EFF Student Command to be stationed at the gates of all institutions of higher learning and ensure that no one is denied education because of debt or lack of funding. No institution must operate as if there is even one. No institution must operate if there is even one student who cannot register because of fees. One of the battles the Student Command must begin to champion is that of fighting the rampant corruption at institutions of higher learning. There must be a deliberate program to expose corruption that relates to infrastructure development and tender processes at institutions of higher learning, as this has an impact on the higher education sector performance outputs as a whole. Professors like Vice Chancellor of Fort Hare, Professor Sakele Butlungu, must find allies in the EFF Student Command who will defend efforts to uproot and expose corrupt activities. We expect the high level of activism and selflessness from Student Command as you mobilize the youth behind the banner of economic freedom in our lifetime. You must develop your own program of action to ensure total electoral victory for the EFF in 2024, as there can never be decolonized and free quality education outside of government of the EFF. By now, you must develop a comprehensive voter registration program at all institutions of higher learning and report progress of how many people have been registered to vote on campuses on weekly basis until the elections. We have seen your efforts thus far in confronting the regime and bringing awareness to the issues confronting the higher education sector, but much more can be done to ensure that you are at the forefront of not only student struggle, but youth struggle in general. The vacuum in youth activism was apparent when the Department of Basic Education was allowed to release the matric results late into January. The vacuum in youth activism is clear by the silence of young people in the face of massive unemployment amongst young people and the lower voter turnout in the 2021 local government elections. The vacuum of youth activism is clear when they continue to be pit toilets in high schools and teachers who abuse children in schools remain in their posts without confrontation. The vacuum must be filled practically this year, and this is the task of the EFF Student Command. Comrades, the conditions in the continent remain dire, and even the smallest glimpses of hope where we have seen opposition begin to emerge victorious have proven disappointing. As much as the victories of the opposition in the continent in places such as Kenya confirms the death of former liberation movements, which allow a new post-liberation generation of African leaders to emerge. Much of this opposition has proven to be reactionary. We saw the newly elected president of Kenya, William Ruto, attended the funeral of the head of the British monarchy, Elizabeth, paying tribute and respect to an institution that committed genocide against the anti-colonial Mau Mau rebels in Kenya. In Zambia, we have seen the newly elected president surrendering the country to the mercy of the World Bank and its concessional loans, one that amounts to $275 million, further entrenching African dependency on the parasitic institutions which dictate economic policy in the country. The oppositions which are emerging in the continent as the liberation movements die do not seem to be revolutionary in content and in character. And this is a threat that we must guard against here in South Africa as well. The death of the ANC must be managed by a progressive left which is led by the EFF, lest the country be thrown into the right-wing regression. Comrades, our people continue to be persecuted in Eswatini, most recently culminating in the murder of a human rights activist, Thulani Maseko. The regime of Mswati has grown in arrogance and requires much more confrontation and solidarity by all of us in the region and the continent. That Mswati is embraced by the political establishment in South Africa and invited to events of significance, revealed that the ruling party in South Africa will sacrifice the cause of human rights in the face of political expediency. We, as the EFF, must therefore lead the charge and bring the struggle in Eswatini to its finality. Our international relations must begin to meaningfully mobilize international solidarity for the people of Eswatini, beginning for a call on financial embargoes against businesses of Mswati. Mswati must financially be isolated from trade and business in the SADC region, the continent, and the world as the first step towards his ultimate removal and imprisonment. We must begin to take the EFF into the continent in a much more meaningful manner to avoid political chance takers utilizing the name and brand of the EFF for personal wealth accumulation. This plenum must provide decisive direction on how the organization can build meaningful and strategic relations in the continent in a way that will benefit the organization in the war to be waged in 2024. Commissars and fighters, we must be able to strike a delicate balance between imperative to condemn that anti-women rights Taliban regime in Afghanistan, while understanding the devastating impact of imperialist meddling by the USA and United Kingdom in the political instability in the region. It is an objective fact that chaos was created in Afghanistan and across Middle East in search for supposed terrorist and non-existing weapons of mass destruction. This chaos has created to ease the extraction of oil in the region, and as a result, the Middle East has never known peace since those interventions which were based on greed. The regimes in the Middle East, however, continue to practice crude, conservative forms of religion which spill over into governance and create an environment where women are denied opportunities to education, jobs, and skills development. We do not align with this. We must begin to speak with a much stronger voice in that regard. Our position with regard to ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine remain the same, and as the terrorist organization known as NATO consolidates itself to further arm Ukraine and encroach on the security of Russia, we must, as the left, condemn and expose NATO. At the current moment, NATO is violating all agreements which were reached at the end of the Cold War, which was to not further expand its influence towards the East. NATO is currently the principal aggressor in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and we must develop and popularize this position and never show any confusion in this regard. Those of you who have a hotline with Morocco, you must tell them that we are on the side of the people of Western Sahara. For as long as the people of Western Sahara are not given their rightful land, we will never rest to fight for the return of the land of the Sahrawi people. Fellow fighters, Israel remains an apartheid state, and we will never know peace and democracy for as long as Palestinians are still robbed and oppressed by Israel. We will never be on the side of the powerful, because our founding manifesto requires us to always be on the side of the weak. Commissars and fighters, the process for the 2024 national and provincial elections begins today. The Central Command team has outlined and expressed that the primary objective of the year 2023 will be massive voter registration. This is because the victory of the EFF remains impossible if we are going to compete for an electoral base that we did not register and did not choose to be part of the voter system to vote for the EFF. We need to establish our own voter base so that we know we have a dependable and trusted voters who know that the EFF is the only viable option for government and have been introduced to the voting system by the EFF. This means that all structures and public representatives and individuals within structures must receive mandates to register people to vote on a daily basis. The 2024 elections will be the most defining since 1994, as we expect to bring the ruling party under 50% nationally. Therefore, all of us must prepare for the reality of coalitions to define our national political landscape. Commissars and fighters, we have seen at local government the instability that characterizes governance, wherein there is a shift almost on a monthly basis. As the leadership, we have resolved that the EFF can no longer afford to be on the touchlines of governance, as our people will question what role we have played in governance as we head to the 2024 election. We are therefore constantly engaged in meetings with opposition parties, trying to find ways not only to stabilize the situation, but to equally ensure the EFF gains the necessary governance experience. One of abnormalities we have identified is that the Racist Democratic Alliance, which at every opportunity insults the EFF and refused to work with us, occupied leadership roles in all of the metropolitans of Gauteng province. They have since been removed in Johannesburg, and the reality is that they will likely be removed across the metros in a bid to ensure that they are taught humility and that this organization of ours gets the necessary governance experience. The reality, comrades, is that we have been the most generous organization to all opposition political parties, and this favor has not been returned at any level. This rings true in many years, even where you will think we'll get experience through deputy mayors in KwaZulu-Natal, where our deputy mayors have no clear responsibility. They are just given titles and bodyguards, yet they don't have any role to play. Here and now, we must say without any fear of contradictions, all our deputy mayors under the IFP must resign with immediate effect, and we are no longer working with the IFP. We thought that apartheid collaborator has changed its spots, but it has come very clear that the apartheid collaborator IFP is not ready to change. The IFP must not get anything everywhere where we are involved. Be Johannesburg, Ekurhuleni, Mogale City, anywhere you see the ugly head of the IFP, put it aside. I hope you, deputy mayors, were not so comfortable with the bodyguards and everything else. If they are here, tell them to go back. You will come with a public transport. We want to keep you informed, therefore, that there will be many changes in governance where the EFF has either been silent or has voted for certain political parties. The EFF will no longer be a stepping stone for others to govern at its own expense, and we want to form part of governance, and we must be treated as equals in any arrangements that will be constituted. As our deployees and leaders, you must therefore be prepared to defend the organization and the decision it takes for its own good at any given moment. The time of the EFF being afraid of criticism has run out. As our counterparts work with the corrupt, with criminals and extortionists in order to gain access to power and to exhibit their own governance capacity, our people must be conscious of the need for the party they call when they are in trouble to govern at local government if they want to see a long-lasting change in their lives. Let me warn now that as we prepare to get into government, one thing we'll never tolerate is corruption. Not only corruption that comes from those who are in the deployed positions, but corruption that will come from those who occupy leadership of the EFF outside governance, who will go to municipalities and want to dictate to our deployed cadres as to who must get a tender and get which job and do this or that. I've seen with keen interest some uncontrollable interest from some amongst us when we talk about a possibility of governing. They do so with serious interest. You can see them rubbing their hands that they cannot wait to put those hands on the resources of the municipalities. They must be warned, because no EFF will defend a corrupt leader. Corruption is the #1 enemy of the EFF. When we enter these municipalities, we are not entering to go and enrich ourselves, our families, and our friends. We are going in there to make use of the overalls that we wear every day when we go to our deployments. We are going to dirty our hands. We are going to make sure that our streets are clean, that the sewer spillage is stopped, that those who seek jobs are given jobs. without favor and political affiliation. We are going to make sure that the roads that lead to the gravesites are cleared. We are going to make sure that all entrances to townships are cleared. We are going to make sure that illegal dumping is going to be something of the past in the township and in the rural areas. We are going to make sure that municipality collects garbage every day according to their schedule. All of that must be done without favor. I said to the SG, he must invite that councillor of the EFF who has just recently won a by-election in Mpumalanga. If you are in doubt of what a councillor must do, in the next few days, please have an exchange with that comrade Mafia. Make sure that he shares with you how he consistently, without fail, keeps the people involved. He loves his people. You can see by how he gets involved with his communities. He doesn't do it for pleasure. I can't say the same about my councillor where I come from in Wat13 in Sishiu. I've heard so many elderly people when I'm at home that he prefers glory more than dirtying his hands, working for the people. That the previous councillor of the EFF is actually much better than this one, Julius. We don't know where the EFF fetched this one. Without fail, that is the feedback I get when I'm at home. I'm sharing this experience with you because I was at home for the whole of December. And all elderly people, including the youth, have repeatedly told me that this councillor is failing us. I've taken a personal decision to arrange a transport for him to go and visit that councillor in Mpumalanga and spend a week with him so that he can teach him how things are done if you want to remain a relevant councillor who enjoys the support of his people. In the EFF, comrades, positions are not luxury. It's a calling by ordinary people, which we must receive and serve with honor. It's useless to go around saying, my ward is served by an EFF councillor, when in reality, there is no service to our people. I am no friends with anyone who wants to use the name of the EFF to earn a salary and benefit his friends and his family. If you want to be a friend of mine, love and protect the EFF and do so not through your mouth, but through your actions. The Tonga speaking people always tell us that metero ya bulabula. Commissars and fighters, the EFF is turning 10 years old this year. It has been a difficult 10 years that has come with challenges, success, and lessons. We have been able to build a vehicle for the poor that has not shaken in the face of capitalist aggression. We have been able to create a political home for those who are tired of corruption, for those who are tired of victimization and racism. We have been able to build a leftist alternative that has gone back to the roots of our liberation struggle. We have grown steadily since our first participation in 2014 national government elections, and we have been the only political party to show an upward trajectory in performance since our inspection. Our public representatives have been warriors in our councils, legislatures, and national parliament, fighting for accountability, transparency, and good governance, even when we have been confronted with violence and intimidation. Fellow fighters, you form part of a revolutionary history, and no one can take away your contributions, your sacrifices, and what you have given to this economic emancipation movement. It does not matter what may happen. Perhaps for many who were deployed to legislature, this is the last time we may meet as you were deployed on the ticket of political leadership, which you have maybe lost in the recent Provincial People's Assembly. As you relinquish those responsibilities, as the SG will be delivering not so good news to you, worry not. Your names are engraved in the history of economic emancipation of our revolution. Yours has never been a personal glory. Yours has been a contribution towards the total liberation of the dejected masses of our people. Standing here, I know that you will remain loyal and disciplined members of our organization and continue to participate at a branch level and use that experience to strengthen your own branch and any other lower deployment you may get. All that matters is that you have made your contribution towards the liberation of the people of South Africa. These 10 years have been of true sacrifice and selflessness. It is an achievement that can never be undermined even by the greatest doomsayers. The 10th anniversary will be celebrated at FNB Stadium, and the leadership of Gauteng and Johannesburg is tasked with ensuring the success of this historical festival of the poor. No laziness will be tolerated heading towards this campaign. It will require a great effort to ensure that we do not only fill the venue, but that there is an overflow outside of the FNB Stadium. We must present on that day to our people the People's Manifesto for Economic Freedom as we prepare to govern in 2024. It must be an occasion where we recommit ourselves to the founding manifesto of the EFF and the 7 non-negotiable cardinal pillars. It must be an occasion which is felt across the continent and the world as the day on which the young organization reaches a stage of maturity and can stand head and shoulders with the great anti-colonial movements of African history. The roots of economic freedom have grown strong since we planted the seeds a decade ago. Let us now nurture this tree that will provide the shades to the African child in times of hardship and difficulty. It is 10 years of selfless struggle, and we have a duty to continue to build this organization for another 100 years as shield and spear in the hands of the poor. Let us build this movement of Winnie Mandela, of Nkgopotse Tiro, of Steve Biko, of Robert Sobukwe, of Muammar Gaddafi, of King Cetshwayo, of Queen Nzinga, of Queen Mantatisi, of King Hintsa. I say to Peter Mokaba and Winnie Mandela, your teachings have not come to nothing. I am ready to ensure that this organization succeed beyond an individual. This organization is not Julius Malema. This organization is not my family. At any time you want me to go, I will do so proudly because I've made my mark. Thank you.
Umela.
Masibulele kumongameli ngoku sizawuthatha ithuba loba sidile ne-discussion of the political over. The guidance has been given. Now we're paving a way forward. I'm going to take hands for the discussions. Even if you have a question, you have an input, you are welcome. Can we see hands? There's a hand here, one.